Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Terrible Leader, where real leaders share the raw truth about the lessons they learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Join our host, Lacey Nelson, founder of Transcend Leadership Collective and former terrible leader. Every leader can become worthy of being followed if they are willing to put in the work. On this podcast, we share the messy stories and behind-the-scenes reality of what the work actually entails. We welcome you to this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. Hello, and welcome back to Confessions of a Terrible Leader. I'm your host and former terrible leader, Lacey Nelson. Today, we have Olivia Van Guyse with us, and she has her doctorate, fresh out of her doctorate, I do believe, but not fresh out of experience. You're going to learn about this woman. She has been building not only her career, but she has an online following the size of a city. There's over 220,000 people that are listening to what she has to say when it comes to fitness, nutrition, and she also is a specialist in pelvic floor health, which is very important. And she is going to share with us today just some of her story and how she got where she is. So with all of that said, Olivia, did I leave anything out?
You did not. That just about covers me. Thank you, Lacey, for having me on the show. I'm very excited.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. So tell us a little bit, when did you start your 220,000 people TikTok account, and why did you start it?
Yeah, no, great question. So I kind of started it on accident. This was back in 2020. I was finishing my last year of undergrad at University of Wisconsin, and it was the thick of COVID. I was already posting on Instagram just for fun, only healthy recipes. It was never my face. This was before Reels and everything like that, or before I was doing Reels at least. And during COVID, I decided to make a recipe, and I was kind of anti-TikTok. I didn't want to download it. I thought it was for, high school, middle schoolers, but I decided to download it. I just posted a chia seed pudding recipe video, and I woke up the next day and it had 1 million views. And me and a couple of my roommates were like, oh my gosh, what the heck? It was a very low quality video, so it was kind of funny. So one of my roommates said, she's like, Olivia, you should run with this. You've been trying to do it on Instagram, do it on TikTok. So since then, I had just started posting consistently and kind of blew up with healthier recipes on TikTok and just have kind of grown it since then. And it just kind of formed and flowed on its own. And that kind of switched into fitness content as I started working in person as a personal trainer before I went to physical therapy school. So it wasn't a big plan, it just kind of flowed, and I kind of went with it.
Okay. You blew up overnight, totally unexpected. You had to figure out, what do I do with this following, right? Am I going to do anything with it? Am I not? And you said at that time also were doing personal training?
Yes. So I had just graduated and was posting. And then a couple months later, I got a job as an in-person personal trainer. And I did that for a year and was learning all of that while I continued to post my recipes. And it was actually then that one of the other trainers at the gym had suggested that do you do nutritional coaching? And I was like, no, I just am posting my recipes, with my own knowledge and from my own research and experiences. And he's like, oh, you should get your nutrition coaching certification. So I did and started coaching at the gym. And then once I went to physical therapy school, took that coaching online and started my own business doing that too.
Excellent. So walk us down the pathway of going from that to I think I'll get my doctorate. How did that unfold?
Yeah. So that was physical therapy school was kind of always the plan. Mm-hmm. At Wisconsin in undergrad, I majored in kinesiology, which is exercise and movement science, and had kind of decided, I wanted to take a gap year and work and, just get some hands-on experience, personal training before going to physical therapy school. I also just honestly wanted a break from school. I was pretty burnt out, pretty stressed from trying to get a good GPA, to get into physical therapy school. Plus it was COVID, so I graduated in 2020, so I didn't really know if physical therapy school would be in person. The year above me actually had to do the anatomy cadaver labs, so the dissecting.
Yeah.
They had to do it all online, and if I was going to be paying full tuition, I wanted that in-person experience. So it all worked out, and basically as a personal trainer in person, that's when I applied to physical therapy school, did the interviews, did some touring, and kind of made that decision.
Okay. Well, fast forward us. Tell us like where you're at now, what life is looking like for you. I know you're in like a totally different state now, so give us a little update.
Yeah. So currently I am now, fast forward, I graduated physical therapy school in November, and I now work kind of part-time as an in-person physical therapist specializing in pelvic health, which includes like pregnancy, postpartum, women's health, incontinence, things like that, in Orange County, California. So I made a big move out here, but I am still doing, content creation and still doing my online fitness and nutrition coaching business as well, which I'm very grateful that I'm able to do all of those things while continuing to go on the path of working as a clinician in person.
Yeah.
So it's been a transition for sure, but it's been pretty smooth for the most part and pretty good. So I'm grateful that that's the way that it's kind of all gone.
Yeah. So are you a solopreneur, or do you have a team that works with you?
I am currently a solopreneur. This is something that I've been thinking about, putting a team together or either just someone to kind of help me. But I think that's a difficult transition, especially that first employee from what I've been, reading and seeing. So currently in the works, more of the thought process, but kind of the works. We'll see.
Yeah. It is a big first step. We know some people who could help you.
Right. It is. We'll be chatting.
Yes. It is a big first step to bring that first person on and decide I'm going to take that, because then you have to develop the skill of having this vision, that creative vision that's just been in your head, to like, now I've got to translate that, make it actionable, make sure I have there's quite a bit to it. However, I realize you probably haven't gotten to the stage that you are at with your career, building your career, continuing to have the consistency to build an online presence. Like that takes so much discipline, consistency, commitment to what you're about. So speak a little bit to, do you conceptualize yourself? This is all about leadership. Like, how do you understand yourself as leading? I don't want to assume you do, but I hope you do. And kind of what has it been like, that mind game that we all play when we're figuring ourselves out and how we understand ourselves as leaders or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've kind of always seen myself as a leader, and in high school I was, class president all 4 years of school, and just really enjoyed, probably honestly initially it was because I enjoyed being in charge and liked making decisions. Like I wanted to plan the prom, and in order to plan the prom I needed to be a class officer. That was kind of the trajectory I took. But regarding leading either like my clients, leading my followers, leading my patients, it's definitely been, I think leading has always been kind of come easier to me. However, when you have an individual in front of you with specific goals or desires that you're trying to help them with, it gets a lot more difficult than the masses, in my opinion. Instead of just like sending a message out and like, whoever is my audience, it's going to stick, versus someone coming to me saying, I want to have more energy. I want to make time for the gym. I want to eat healthy, lose some weight, build muscle, whatever it is. That becomes a lot more difficult. I think what I've struggled with the most being a leader in that sense is being a younger leader and a younger professional in the field of both physical therapy and personal training, fitness and nutrition coaching. So what I've kind of discovered is that a lot of people might not like either trust you in the beginning, or you feel like you have to prove yourself or people who are either older than you or more experienced than you in your professional life will give you advice and you feel like you kind of have to take it. So I think the biggest struggle for me as a leader has been trusting myself.
Yes.
For example, like in the beginning of my coaching experience, I know exactly what to do, what to, give you calorie wise, protein wise, if you're going to track those things. I know how to create a workout plan and program for you. But if we're like a couple months in and a client was getting a little bit upset because they weren't seeing the progress at the rate that they wanted to see it, I would get in my head a little bit and second guess my plan and be like, oh shoot, like, it's my fault. And I would change their plan and be like, okay, like, yeah, like, let's, sorry, like, let's do this more aggressively, instead of being like, I understand that you're frustrated. This is the rate that we're going. If we continue X, Y, and Z, like, this is how it's going to work. And just trusting myself in that sense.
Yep.
On the business side as well, I had some people in my life who weren't really well versed in like the online coaching space.
Yep.
Which was really up and coming, especially 2020, 2021, when gyms were shut down. Lots of people transitioned to online and no one knew how to do it. So I had been talking with people about, hey, I think I want to hire a business coach who specializes in this, or I think I want to charge this much. And I had lots of opinions from people who weren't necessarily in that line of work or in that space, who were like, that's way too much. I would never pay for that. Or why do you need to hire a business coach? Just do X, Y, and Z. That's a waste of money. And I listened for a while because I'm like, oh, like, well, this person works in business. They have their MBA. Like, I'm going to listen to them. What do I know? I'm 20 something. But then I noticed that when I began to trust myself and my own intuitions and did my own research, that I did end up hiring a business coach, and it was the best decision that I ever made. Yeah, exactly. And I wish I had earlier. That really kind of kickstarted for me. Like, it was a switch flipped in my head. Like, okay, Olivia, even though you don't have a lot of experience in this realm or even just on earth as some other people who are giving you advice, you take everything with a grain of salt almost and trust yourself. So I definitely still take advice from others, of course, but I always am like, is this in line with what I want to do? And am I taking advice from someone who has been where I am or has accomplished something that I have? Or is it more from a kind of almost like a hater standpoint? Like, are they, oh, I'd never pay that much. And it's like, well, maybe you wouldn't, but someone else would, because they see the value in what I'm doing. So I think trusting yourself and going back to your why you're doing something is really what I have been trying to be more mindful of when running my business and when, working with clients and patients.
Yes. I want to give you a standing ovation right now. I also started very young in my career, and I'm just hearing so many things that I have echoed, like trusting yourself, not taking advice from people that you don't actually respect or are in alignment with. If your values are out of alignment with their values, like, why am I letting you influence me so much and question myself so much? Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Massive learning lessons that I too wish I would have learned earlier. And I think you learned them faster than I did. So cheers to you for that.
As long as we learn them at some point.
Yeah, it's a lot less expensive to learn them earlier, though. Let's just say that. And a lot less painful. Do you have a specific example of in my world where I'm like, oh my gosh, your example of like having the client prescribe what they need to get to the end point and they're starting to feel pressure, or you're starting to feel pressure, completely relate to that in a different context. But one of the things that I did early on, and I regret in the building this business, is I let people influence me because they thought they knew what I should be doing to get them to the end goal. So there was a period of time where I was like writing employee handbooks. Like, that is so far away from what I wanted to be doing. Yeah. He thought that was going to be the answer. And I just listened because I did not have that ability to trust and have that assurance in myself yet. And it didn't get them what they wanted in the end. And, it wasn't a win for any of us. So what is your employee handbook experience? Do you have a specific?
Yeah. So there's this one client, one online fitness and nutrition client that comes to mind. She wanted to lose weight. However, she had a previous coach who had put her eating under 1,000 calories a day. If you're in the fitness and nutrition space, like there's kind of a running joke that eating 1,200 calories is for toddlers. Like that's what toddlers need to eat per day. When we're eating as adults, when we're eating below that, it's obviously not good. So she hadn't been losing weight, even though she was under 1,000 calories per day. And she came to me. I gave her the plan of what we need to do. I was like, this is going to be a longer haul because I'm not just going to drop you in a steeper calorie deficit. We need to do some reverse dieting, which is increasing your calories week by week. For those who don't know, who are listening, to get to more of a healthy level. And once we're there, then we can think about dropping into more of a calorie deficit once we're in that point, which would be months later.
And that's terrifying for her.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. The thought, and I'm sure so many women can relate to this, the thought of wanting to lose weight and being told that you need to eat more is scary. Yep. And I understand that, but I try to, just give the experience. I've had many clients who needed to do this. Personally, I've needed to do this before. I can guarantee you, if we do this right, you will not gain fat during this process. So she had agreed. She was on board. We were a couple months in where she wasn't super compliant. She was still eating, like say I was telling her to eat 1,400 calories. She was still in the 1,200s, like maybe some days eating 1,400, but still not really compliant with the plan I had given. And a couple months in, she wasn't super satisfied with the results. And I was like, well, I had told you that I tried to stand my ground for a little bit, kind of repeated what I was saying before in so many words. And then I think a couple weeks later, she was really dissatisfied. And she was also a couple of decades older than me. So I was probably a bit intimidated as well. And I was like, okay, I don't want her mad at me. Oh my gosh, she's spending all this money and I don't want her to waste her time, waste her money. I'm going to say, okay, you know what? Yeah, let's try a calorie deficit. So I did that. I know. I'm kicking myself. This was years ago.
I asked for this story. Yes. I'm empathizing with you, having been in your shoes in different ways. Yes.
And lo and behold, it didn't flip and work and I knew that too. But I also, in my brain, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give her what she wants and it's still not going to work. And that's going to kind of prove that we need to continue doing what we're doing. Well, it didn't work. And she was still mad. And she's like, what's going on? I think it's my hormones, like da, 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 da. And then I felt even worse because I'm like, okay, my plan kind of backfired because I thought it was going to be like, you know what, Olivia, like you were right. What we were doing is working. Let's get back on that. I'm like, okay, great. But it didn't work that way. It kind of went the opposite where I was dissatisfied. Like you had mentioned, I was dissatisfied because she wasn't really listening and I changed the plan. She was dissatisfied because she didn't get results. And she was almost in a worse mental space because she thought there was something wrong with her and her body, which there definitely could have been. She was, close to menopause at that point. But I just still look back at that to this day and feel terrible because I know I should have just stood my ground and given her almost an ultimatum. If you don't want to follow the plan that I'm giving you, then don't work with me anymore. But I'm not going to do something that goes against what I believe is best for you and your goals. And that's what I would say now. But that was really kind of a kicker for me that I was like, dang, you should have trusted in yourself. Yep. That's my employee.
Thank you for sharing that. I think all of us listening probably have a version of that story, whether it be working with an employee and going back on something we said because we doubt ourselves, or whether it be working with a client. We all have some version of that. And that learning to listen to your instincts and stand your ground, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary, is just so critical. Is there any advice that you would give to someone in that process right now, feeling themselves in the middle of that tug, to help kick them over the edge of learning how to trust themselves? That's a hard question. I know it is.
Absolutely. Because the answer to that is almost trust yourself, but it's like, okay, how do you trust yourself? I like to think I continually try to revisit my why. So it's almost a mental exercise that I do when I'm feeling that tug. So in this case, if I had revisited my why, it's like, okay, why do you have her as a client? Why are you helping her? Why are you doing this? And my reason is because I want her to be like educated on like what's the best for her. I want her to see progress. I want her to hit her goals. In order to do that, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And that would have solved that immediately. But I didn't think that, and my why had turned into I want to keep this client happy, and I want to keep this client, period, keep this client as my client. And that's really not the why. It's, of course, I want my clients to be happy, but I've learned that you have to give them a little bit of tough love sometimes, because when you're it's a tough balance of being nice and being forgiving, which you absolutely need to do. On the other end of it, you don't want to give too much grace, because then it's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. You want to do that? Yeah, sure. Then you're just a friend. You're not a coach. So if you return to your why, I think that can help you almost trust yourself and trust your education, your experience. A lot of the time, you know a lot more than your client, and don't let them tell you that, don't let them be in charge, because they hire you for a reason.
I love that. Yeah. The sheer amount of noise they have to filter through too.
Absolutely. Yeah. The amount of people who ask me, hey, I saw this on TikTok. Hey, I saw this on Instagram. Is this right? And I'm just shaking my head. And of course, I post on those platforms as well, but it's really difficult to know who to trust on those platforms. You see people posting, don't ever eat this. Don't ever do this exercise. And it's really tough to filter through all of that. So when you just kind of know like what's what, and they're asking you, hey, like, is this right? Just know that you know a lot. Like, that reminds me, I guess, that I know a lot more about this than like someone else does who isn't educated in this space. And that also helps with me trusting myself as well.
What beautiful, perfect advice for people in that spot. Learning how to trust yourself, reminding yourself why you're doing it, and looking at all of the evidence that you have that you actually do know what you're doing and what you're recommending, and recognizing that some people don't have the same frame of reference and they're coming to you for a reason, and they might be like hyper committed to something that is something that they got super excited about because they saw it on a different TikTok, and they have no idea that they don't have the expertise to go, that's a horrible idea. That's not going to work for you. And this doesn't work in your context. Yeah.
It's tough. Don't get me wrong. It is tough to kind of break someone's heart in that way, especially, and I'm sure you see this all the time, if someone has a certain method that they've been doing something for so long and they're so bought into it, and you're coming in and telling them, hey, the thing that you've been doing for the last 5, 10, 20 years isn't going to work anymore, or that's not working. We need to do something else. That's tough for them to hear. And you also, I think, need to be compassionate, like be forthcoming with your knowledge, but also be compassionate that that's going to be a difficult transition for them. It's like you've kind of like rocked their world in a sense.
Yes, 1,000,000%. You do rock their world, and it takes them some time to adjust to the idea, and they need the evidence, right? So it's giving them that time of dipping their toes in the water and like, go try this and then come back. And to your point, when the evidence takes a while to stack and it's not immediate gratification, it gets harder. And that's where your coaching skills and the trust in yourself has to come through, are those moments when they're not getting the results right away, but you know they're on the way, but you're like, oh, hang in there. We're going to get there.
Absolutely. No, seriously. I'm like, I promise you, just wait. I'm like, coming, just keep going.
I don't know how many times I say, trust the process. They're like, I don't want to trust the process. I have zero evidence right now and I still have pain. That is when those coaching skills have to be sharpened. Yeah. And the trust in ourselves is critical, because that's when we're going to fold, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. This has been such a great conversation. Where can people find you? And do you have anything exciting coming up you want to share with us?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. My handle is at livewellvg. It's LIVWELLVG. I also have a website. It's not super updated. That's a business thing I needed to do, but it's also livewellvg, same spelling.com. As far as events and everything coming up, I honestly don't really right now. I've got a few things in the works, new programs, but I am taking 1 to 2 new online fitness and nutrition coaching clients. If anyone is interested, I have a coaching application link in my bio on both my social medias. And I also have recently rolled out a more affordable workout program. It's more cookie cutter. It's called Athletics and Aesthetics. And you can also find the link to subscribe to that also in my bio as well. So yeah, that's what I've got.
Thank you. We will link to all of that in the show notes. So those of you listening, you don't have to be writing frantically. Just go to the show notes and we will give you all of the connections that you need to be able to go straight to Dr. Olivia Van Guyse. And she will be ready to lead you to success through her evidence and experience. And hopefully all of you listening today have been inspired to really trust yourself more. Such an important conversation. Something I know I sure needed to learn how to do way earlier than I did. And Olivia, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Such good conversation. I appreciate your vulnerability, your transparency. And I imagine anyone who is lucky / smart enough to have you as a coach is living a better life than they were when they found you. And what a great gift you give. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Lacey. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you. You've been a great host and I'm so happy I was able to come on the show.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to everybody listening, you know what I'm going to say. Till next time, go manage like a leader.
Thanks for being part of this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. If you are in the early stages of leadership, or you are currently in a leadership position and are supervising rising leaders within your organization, you are going to want to learn more about our virtual live community created specifically for emerging leaders. Our first virtual cohort begins on April 2nd, and remember, this is a live virtual community, so you can sign up from anywhere. You will be connecting with other heart-first leadership-minded individuals and learning together. Sign up for our free newsletter, the link is in the show notes, to be the first to know when registration goes live and receive first access. Confessions of a Terrible Leader is hosted by Lacey Nelson and produced by Mary Scott. Music is by Leif Olson and Mary Scott from the band The Number of Months. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, go manage like a leader.